choices voters make in the coming November election will determine Minnesota's next direction. Will Minnesotans continue to choose a divided government, or will one party take charge of the governor's office, the Senate, and the House of Representatives? Joining me to offer her perspective is University of Minnesota political science professor, Dr. Kathryn Pearson. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
So as we approach the 2022 election, what is jumping out at you, and how are you viewing this current political landscape?
Well, first, political context matters. And we know that historically, the party that's in the White House always faces an uphill battle in midterm elections. And that's in races for the US Congress, but also statewide elections as well. So sort of going into this election, because President Biden is a Democrat, Democrats face additional challenges. Added to that, President Biden isn't very popular, particularly among independents and Republicans. And overall, his popularity ratings are sort of hovering in the 40s. And so that doesn't bode well for Democrats, again, running at the congressional level and in races across the country. Having said that, candidates matter, and in state races, sort of every district's political and partisan composition matters.
According to the most recent campaign finance reports in the state of Minnesota, the DFL has outraised the GOP as we head into Election Day. What impact will fundraising ultimately have on races statewide?
Well, it's a sign of strength for the DFL in Minnesota, both in statewide races and in legislative races, where the parties have raised more. The DFL has raised more than the Republicans, and that allows DFLers to have an edge when it comes to hiring staff, contacting voters, running ads, and really get their messaging out. So midterm elections tend to see turnout about 20 points lower than presidential elections do. So both parties are really trying to mobilize their voters, mobilize the voters that came out 2 years ago and voted for their party's candidates.
With a polarized electorate, many races will likely be very close, and some may require extra time to count the ballots. This isn't new, as we've had close elections in the past, but what is new is that there is a segment of the population that continues to believe that the 2020 election was stolen. How do you see this impacting the 2022 election?
Well, this dynamic is troubling, that the legitimacy of elections is called into question, especially an election where secretaries of state in all 50 states certified the election results. And so we are seeing many candidates who are running who either won't answer questions about the legitimacy of the 2020 election or are saying it is not legitimate. We'll see what happens in 2022. Some races will be close. We're looking at about a couple of dozen potentially close state legislative races and potentially some close statewide races in Minnesota and frankly across the country. And so we'll see how long it takes to determine the results, but Minnesota has been through this before. Just think back to 2008 when Al Franken was sworn in as U.S. Senator after recounts and sort of going through the ballots in July. We also saw a protracted recanvassing in 2010 in the gubernatorial race. And so Minnesotans have been through this before, but both sides agreed that the process was fair. And so ultimately, I have confidence in the Secretary of State's office and the process, but I think that politically it could be contentious.
In the governor's race, both sides have had what some journalists are calling unforced errors, referring to Governor Walz's response to the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme in which $250 million was allegedly embezzled from a pandemic meals program, and then most recently to the incident where Republican candidate Scott Jensen repeated the internet hoax that schools are providing litter boxes for children who are dressed as cats. Do these types of incidents change voters' minds?
They don't change voters' minds, but they sort of change the calculus of candidate support. So one of the things that political scientists have really picked up on in the last several cycles is the rise of negative partisanship. And that is a feeling, not the partisanship where you have a close attachment to your own party, but instead great animosity toward the other party. And we're seeing a rise in negative partisanship as a motivation for vote choice. In other words, I'm not so much going to vote for the candidate candidate that I like, but I'm going to vote against the candidate that I really dislike. And so, of course, partisan predispositions affect how individuals are taking in this news. So if someone from your party that you like is sort of has an unforced error, you might be more willing to ignore it and focus on the things that you like about that candidate. But it just adds to this negative partisanship when individuals are sort of collecting things that they dislike about the other candidate. And it could turn off voters who may be unsure if they're going to vote or not in a midterm. Again, turnout is often lower. And so both candidates have to think about sort of motivating their own base and not turning off potential voters.
Republican ads are pointing to the rise in crime and increasing inflation as reasons to vote their candidates into office. DFLers are pointing to the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade as a reason to vote for DFL candidates. Both sides are touting their varying approaches to education. Are these the issues that you believe are top of mind to voters?
Yes, and surveys suggest that these are the issues that voters are most concerned about. And each party is also playing to their strength. So if you look at national public opinion polls, in general, voters see Republicans as doing a better job with crime, doing a better job with the economy. And so it's no surprise that Republicans are touting those issues. Polls also suggest that Democrats do a better job as a party on the issue of abortion. And so it's not surprising that Democrats are talking about abortion as a way to really motivate the Democratic base, perhaps get voters to the polls who aren't that enthusiastic about Joe Biden, but would otherwise vote Democratic, and sort of knowing that this is an issue that matters in every state in the wake of the Dobbs decision. And so both parties' candidates are trying to motivate their voters on issues where they're thought to do a better job. Education is an issue that's more evenly divided. And so voters are trying to talk, or candidates are trying to talk to voters about sort of their strengths on the issue of education.
Before we have to go, you mentioned a moment ago that turnout tends to be lower in the midterm elections. In Minnesota, who will determine the outcome of this election? Will it be independent voters? Will it be suburban voters? Which demographic groups are key?
Well, it depends on the elections that we're talking about. So if we're talking about the state Senate, there are about 5 Senate districts that are really competitive and will determine party control. Bucks Senate seat, St. Cloud, a couple of suburban seats, and then about 15 House districts that will determine party control as well. And so look to those districts for party control. But then if we're talking about the statewide elections, sort of each candidates are playing to their party's base and strengths. So we see Scott Jensen campaigning a lot in northern Minnesota, rural Minnesota, and we see Waltz in many areas of the state as well. But for Democrats to do well in statewide elections, turnout in Hennepin County, Ramsey County really needs to be high. And those are areas where, for the most part, with a few exceptions, there are not that many competitive state legislative races. And so we also see DFLers really trying to motivate that base in the metro area because we've seen in past elections that a big advantage in the metro for the DFL really helps statewide candidates. Turnout in 2018 was about 64%. That was a high turnout midterm. But I expect that with partisans on both sides highly motivated, we'll see similar levels of turnout in 2022.
Dr. Kathryn Pearson, it is always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.